Hello, welcome back to the Why Am I Talking podcast. I'm Jonah, and today I'm going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's movie Taxi Driver. It came out in 1976, so New Hollywood was just getting started. I believe this was Scorsese's second picture. Let me check that real quick. Let's see. Okay, maybe I'm an idiot. Okay, it was not his actual second movie. He had a couple other ones. That was the second big movie, after Mean Streets. It's Robert De Niro, and okay, I should have prepared beforehand. It was Robert De Niro and Jodie Foster is the other person. And Jodie Foster, she's actually so young in this movie that I barely recognized her. I really didn't know it was her until I checked the IMDb page, and then I was like, oh my god, I should have seen that a long time ago. If you're new to my podcast, I'm going to be talking about movies for most of the episodes. I said in my first episode that I might do music or books or something, but mostly it's just going to be movies. I have a ton of movies I'm going to be watching. If you listened to my first one, I did a review of Midsummer, Ari Aster's new horror movie. The link to that will be in the description. And this is going to be a very different review than that because Midsummer is very new to theaters, and so not many people have seen it, and I didn't want to give away spoilers because it's definitely one of those movies too where you don't want to spoil anything because a lot of it's surprising. So I did a two-part kind of episode where I split it, and I warned when there was going to be spoilers. But this movie's been out for almost 50 years, I think, and so not really going to do a spoiler section. I'm not gonna just flat out tell you the whole plot if you haven't seen it yet, and maybe you do after this video, but I'm not gonna skimp away from spoilers or anything because it is a really old movie, and there's a pretty good chance that you have seen it if you're clicking on this video, I would guess, and so I don't want to just shy away from that. Anyway, I'm going to be getting into Taxi Driver. So, for those of you who don't know, or if you need a refresher, Taxi Driver is about a taxi driver named Travis who he drives around the city and he sees a bunch of stuff happening, and basically he decides he wants to take action, and he does. He takes action. That's really the plot of the movie. It's very Hitchcockian in the use of voyeurism, and sort of the pacing just reminded me of Hitchcock a lot. If I was going to start somewhere with this, where would I start? Let's see. I have a bunch of notes. I'm looking at them right now. Actually, let's just expand on that, the voyeurism to start. So, basically, Travis, the main character, he sees a lot of horrible things from his taxi. I'd say at one point a prostitute gets in his car and she's trying to get him to drive away, and then her pimp comes by and drags her away, and she ends up being really important. It's actually Jodie Foster's character, but that's one of the first things he sees. And then just general kind of filth around the city, like people throw stuff at his car at one point, and just kind of petty crimes happening that he witnesses. And he, at the beginning, he's sort of just generally discontent with the crime that he sees happening around, and it later sort of divulges into this burning anger and hatred towards the filth of New York City. And he has a mental snap towards the end of the movie where he just kind of loses it and shaves his head and stuff. It's kind of funny, actually. De Niro does a great job of showing showing that I guess mental breakdown that Travis has. But I'm gonna get more into that later because I have a whole part on De Niro's performance that I want to get into because it was pretty great. I guess I want to go. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep going on this voyeurism because there's a whole lot you can dive into here about how Scorsese really integrated that element pretty deftly into the plot of the movie without even really expressly putting it in the plot. Is that? Yeah, I guess that's a complicated way of saying it. But anyway, the way Scorsese does it is obviously he has, like I was saying earlier, he has Travis just seeing stuff from his taxi, and the way he's observing the city, and at one point he's just like staring at this girl, and like that's like Betsy. Betsy's her name, and she works for the presidential candidate Palantine, and he's literally just like staring at her through a window. He's like not even working. It's the middle of the day, and one of the guys she works with kind of notices and is like, "What the fuck is this guy doing?" It's just kind of funny because I guess at that point in the movie, I kind of didn't know a whole lot about De Niro's character, and so when I thought about it, I was like, "Wow, this guy's actually kind of being creepy." And it was only once the guy who worked there pointed it out that I was like, yeah, he's actually being pretty weird. And it's in a way, it's reminiscent of Rear Window in that facet of kind of watching things happen from literally behind a window. Which I'm going to make more comparisons to Rear Window later on because there is a lot of similarities in terms of character and, again, the use of voyeurism. But another way I noticed that Scorsese integrated that voyeurism was just the way he framed shots. I at the beginning I thought maybe I was like overthinking it, and that the shots, the way they were framed, was almost incidental. But it's Scorsese; nothing's incidental. He obviously did it on purpose. I just I wasn't sure if I was interpreting it correctly, but the way he framed shots was. During conversations, I recall very clearly a scene in a diner. It's the first time I noticed it. Was the characters were kind of on the side of the screen while they were talking to each other, and then behind them there was a window, and you could see out the window city life going on behind them. And sometimes what was going on in the background was actually more interesting than the conversation they were having, and I thought that was curious. And it was really it became more obvious that was the intent, that voyeurism was the intention later on in the movie. But earlier on, you just see like very seemingly non-pertinent things happening in the background. But when it comes to film, nothing is on screen that you don't want on screen. So there had to be a reason for it, and that's really where I started thinking, because there'd just be really small interactions. Like I remember one time, just people just like bumped into each other, like two people in the background, extras. They just bumped into each other, and usually they would have just like, I don't know, like restarted the scene and then been like, "Don't fucking bump into each other," but they just left it in there. And actually, it's probably intentional because it was all meant to be a representation of this sort of the city life was happening around Travis's life. Or I guess, yeah, city life kept going on while Travis was doing other things. At least that's the way I interpreted it. I mean, I'm not a film scholar. I'm literally just guessing. That's the way I watch it. That's what I assumed was the reasoning behind those framing. And like at one point, I almost forgot. At one point, he's having a conversation with the guy, and he's leaned up against his taxi. And in the background, you see like police like pulling someone over and like I think arresting him. I can't really remember, but that was so much more interesting than like what was going on in the conversation, and that was definitely a representation of there's still so much happening in this city while Travis is sort of what's the word I'm going for? Travis is like all he's seeing. Maybe I'm wrong. I kind of want. You know what? I'm gonna redact that statement, but I'm gonna stick with that. That has to do with the voyeurism of we're seeing things that Travis isn't seeing because the city life is always going on around him. That's okay. You know what? That's a good explanation. I'm gonna stick with that. But it was really interesting, and I knew Scorsese was going to deliver with because I read some reviews and they said it was Hitchcockian, and so I was kind of on the lookout for that. And I just watched Rear Window a few weeks ago, so it was fresh in my mind, and that's where I was drawing comparisons from, which leads me to my next point, which was I was going to get into De Niro's portrayal of Travis, and also just Travis as a character, because he's very, very interesting. So first, before I make comparisons to Rear Window, I kind of want to talk about his character as a whole and sort of the arc he goes through, and I'm going to make a comparison to L.B., who's the main character in Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. But so Travis starts as sort of a guy who's just looking for something to do. It seems like that's the reason he starts driving a taxi, is he seems like this very lonely guy who just needs, he sort of just needs something to do. And that's, I think he kind of explains it that way to the guy who's hiring him. And, he seems sort of like a docile guy. He says he was in the Marine Corps. We don't really know much about him. And he quickly becomes infatuated with this girl named Betsy, who is the girl that he was creeping on, like I was talking about earlier, just kind of looking at her. And really when we start to see that this guy actually like has problems is Betsy's like not returning his calls or whatever, and he like goes into the building and is like yelling at her, and he's like, "You're just like the rest of them, you son of a bitch," and like kind of it's like just an asshole for kind of no reason. And I mean, she ignored him. Sure, that's shitty, but like, I mean, come on. And then it really starts to kind of go downhill for Travis here. He actually meets the presidential candidate Palantine, who Betsy works for, and he has a conversation with him in the taxi because he's driving him somewhere. And this is when we start to really get a feel that Travis is like fed up with like the crime in New York City, because Palantine asks him like, what exact of my policies do you agree with? And he's like, well, I actually don't know anything about politics, but the crime here, god damn it, the crime here. And that's when we start to really kind of see, like, I mean, after this, or maybe that's before the break, but regardless, they happen around the same time. And that's when we really start to see, oh, Travis he's kind of got some stuff he's upset about. And he starts to slowly see worse and worse things around the city after that. And you can tell he's just sort of getting pretty upset, I'd say, is the... Wow, that's a really lame description. But yeah, pretty upset is the way I would say it. Like, at one point, this guy gets in his car and, like, tells him to, like, pull over to the side of the street. It's actually a really great scene. I think it might be my favorite scene in the whole movie. This guy tells him to pull over to the side of the street, and so he thinks he's like... Oh, dropped my phone. He thinks he's like just dropping him off somewhere, and so... But then the guy's like, no, I didn't tell you to stop the meter. Like, we're just going to pull over here. And then the guy points up to the window, and it's like the outline of his wife in the window, of this guy's wife who's picking up, and he's like, yeah, this isn't my apartment, but she's in there with a black man. And so I'm going to go kill her. And he just, like, straight up tells him that he's going to murder his wife. And then the scene ends, essentially. I mean, there's a lot of tension that kind of builds because you're unsure of what the hell's going on. And this guy's obviously lost it. And Travis is just kind of sitting there really awkwardly and really unsure of what to do. And it's after that he really starts to think, maybe I should do something about this. Because I think... he's probably starting to, at that point, if I remember correctly, he watches like an interview with Palantine on TV, and he's upset with Betsy, so he starts to kind of lose faith that anything's going to happen because Palantine is really the only thing he knows about Palantine is that Betsy likes him, and since he kind of hates Betsy, he's like, oh, fuck Palantine too, that guy sucks. And so he kind of, I think at this point he was starting to kind of lose faith that anybody was going to clean up the streets, and he's a very lonely person, and so he's like, I'm going to do it myself. And whether that's for attention or because he truly cares about what's happening, that's kind of left up for us to interpret, because he's clearly very lonely, but he also clearly has a distaste for the crime in the city. And so at this point, he buys like 8 guns or something crazy from this dude, and he starts like going. He has like a montage of like him working out and like getting shredded, and then like practicing pulling out his guns and stuff. And actually, I didn't know, but the line, "You talking to me? You talking to me?" Apparently that comes from Taxi Driver. I didn't know. When he started doing it, I had to look it up because I was like, there's no way. But yep, comes from that movie. Pretty famous line, and the seed was really good. De Niro, at this point, you can kind of start to tell that he's definitely mentally ill, because what sane person buys like 8 pistols and like starts training like they're Batman to like fight crime? That's a normal person. A normal person doesn't do that. And this is around the time that he starts to become more engrossed with the prostitution ring that he witnessed earlier. I said earlier that he Jodie Foster's character gets in his car and tries to get him to drive away, and then he doesn't drive away, and then the pimp comes and gets her. And I think because he has a conversation with his friend, and he's like, I'm having bad thoughts about what I should do. This is before he buys the guns. And his friend's like, well, just don't worry about it. He gives terrible advice. It doesn't help at all. So he buys the guns. And I think at this point, he's still trying to kind of follow the advice that his friend gave him. And he's trying to kind of be hands off. Because for a while, he's just working on, he's working on, I guess, shoot, how do I want to... I should have written this down on my notes. He's sort of... Damn. How do I want to put this? He's not taking action, but like you can tell that he wants to. He wants to do something, but like he's having an internal struggle of not going to fight crime, but you could tell he really wants to go fight crime. Like he's like pumping himself up in the mirror, and he's sitting around his house bored, and he's like clearly frustrated. I think probably more about his loneliness than his frustration with the state of the city, but regardless, he's frustrated, and he's having an internal struggle for a while. And he finally decides to go talk to this prostitute, and he pays to see her or whatever, and she wants to have sex with him, but he's like, don't you want to get out of here? Don't you remember me? You tried getting in my taxi. And she's like, I was probably stoned. And he doesn't buy it. So he's pretty upset that she doesn't want to just get out of the life. And he's like, I'll pay for your like bus ticket. I'll pay for you to get wherever. And she turns him down. And her turning him down and not turning away from this life of prostitution that he's offering her an escape from, that is, I guess, the final straw for him. But he's not like upset at her. He's just like, I think that his internal struggle is decided in that scene, that he realizes he's not going to be able to make an impact on the world around him. He's not going to get noticed, which I think is part of it, is that he wants to be noticed by people because he's so isolated that he wants attention. It's definitely a part of his character, is that he wants attention. And her turning him down, he then decides that he's going to take matters into his own hands. And in quite the turn of events, he decides to go assassinate Palantine the presidential candidate, which was not what I was expecting. Oh, but before he goes there, he actually has like a... This is when his mental snap really happens, is he like shaves his head into a mohawk and like goes to this crazy montage of strapping on like a knife on his boot and stuff, and it's... when they pan up, because the camera starts at his feet and it slowly pans up to his head, the last thing I was expecting was a mohawk, and so I thought it was pretty funny. Just random side fact, but yeah, he decides to go kill him, and I when it first was happening, I didn't really understand why he was trying to murder Palantine, because he had like a nice conversation with him in his taxi, and like he didn't seem to be building up a malice for him. In fact, he'd actually bought like Palantine like stickers, and he like had him in his apartment and stuff. But the conclusion I came to, the interpretation I have, is that Palantine represented Betsy to him, and since he still had this resentment towards Betsy, who is the girl that turned him down earlier in the movie, that wasn't returning his calls, that he sort of built up this anger towards Palantine inadvertently, and so he was going to kill him not just out of personal emotion or emotional response emotional anger towards Palantine, but also because there was no action being taken to clean up crime. Even though Palantine wasn't the president at the time, I think that he was just sort of boiling all his anger, and it was all directed at this guy. And so he was going to take him out for God knows what reason. Politically, he seemed to not know a lot about politics, so I think I might be on the right track here about his reasoning to go kill Palantine. I don't even know why I said politically. That was just a weird sentence. But then it really goes down, and he goes after the prostitution ring, and he like kills a bunch of pimps. He gets shot in the neck, which I don't know how he survives that. It might have just been a glancing blow. I couldn't really tell. And it's a really cool scene, actually. And you think... I thought he was going to die, because he crawls into a couch and kind of leans his head back, you know. I assume... I thought he was going to die. But, nope, he lives. And he actually tries to kill himself, which is definitely the moment I realized he's not just, like, crazy. He's, like, really mentally ill. Like he's got to be and that's when I started to realize loneliness was probably a lot more of a factor than I was considering, because you don't just try and kill yourself if you aren't depressed, I guess, or like I don't know what other reason he could have had for that. And so and then at the end he's like a hero or whatever, and there's like newspaper clippings and Jodie Foster's movie parents, like her parents in the movie, they like send him a letter thanking him for getting her out of that life, and then it ends with him kind of in his taxi driving, and he sees like a police siren behind him, I think, and then he just keeps driving. And I didn't really understand the ending a whole lot at that last scene. I don't really know what happened there, but that's his character arc. He starts off pretty normal, kind of a lonely guy, and then through a series of events, he kind of loses it, and then is a hero at the end. Which I guess I just didn't. I didn't see that coming. I assumed that the ending he was gonna like fight people, but I thought for sure he was either gonna die or like mess up. But like he legitimately he was like written about in the papers and stuff, which I just didn't expect, I guess. Because he did just kind of cold blood murder these guys, and there was like no witness. Like I guess the girls can attest that they were pimps, but like I don't know. I feel like if you did that today, like sure people would be happy you killed a bunch of pimps, but like I think you'd probably still go to jail. Like, and I feel like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I don't know. I feel like he should have gone to jail, or like, something else should have happened to him. But he was just universally praised. Whatever. I'm not trying to like dive too deep into that ending there, because I didn't actually fully understand what was going on, because it seemed like since it was all sort of from Travis's point of view, that maybe some of the stuff we were seeing was almost part of his imagination. Maybe. No, maybe. Okay, I'm definitely overthinking it now. But regardless, the ending, pretty ambiguous, left up to interpretation for some things. And I think De Niro just did a great job at playing this kind of quirky character who has a mental issue that, in the end, sort of loses his mind. Let's see, what else do I want to jump into here? Oh, no, I was gonna make my comparison to, if you've seen Rear Window, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's gonna be a quick little comparison here, just something I noticed, because I've watched them fairly recently together. Main character in Rear Window, he's watching people from his rear window, which is the name of the movie, and he sort of, but the difference is he's kind of trapped there, and he's taking action out of boredom, which is actually the same, because the reason De Niro's driving around is out of boredom, it seems. But I guess the comparison of their character arcs is that LB actually ends up kind of going in a little too far, and then things go poorly for him, and then at the end, though, he ends up being the hero, which is kind of the same thing that happened to Travis. And you could make the argument for both of them that they took it too far, and that, you know, it's in Rear Window, it's kind of creepy when he like pulls out like the lens with like 12 goddamn zooms on it. Like, that's, I mean, come on. I know you're bored and you're like stuck. He's like stuck in a wheelchair, but like that's kind of creepy. I was rooting for him, obviously. I liked the main character in Rear Window, but that was a little weird. And same can go for De Niro, where he's like stalking this girl, kind of, and he goes and takes matters into his own hands. But who says he has the right to do that? Blah blah blah. You could make all these different philosophical assumptions, or I guess you could have these discussions about the characters if you wanted to. But I'm not going to dive too much into that because I don't know. It's a movie. I don't really have much of an opinion. I always root for the main characters. If a movie wants me to believe someone is the protagonist and that I should root for them, I usually do. Like, I don't really care what they do. So, De Niro did a great job. I think that the voyeurism, like I was saying, with Scorsese's direction, played heavily into showing us how Travis got from point A to point B internally. Also, the score. The score was really nice for the movie. It had it was really jazzy and sort of had that old school 50s, 60s score to it. And obviously, Scorsese is influenced by those directly before him in the 60s and 50s, so I can see where that was coming from. But he wasn't even the one that scored it, so obviously. But I don't know where that sentence was going, but the score was good. The score did a good job setting the mood. Typically, I'm kind of split on jazzy scores. I think that sometimes they're a little cliche in their too old-timey, like they're too attached to what an old movie would be, or the mood of like a 40s or 50s movie. And so I'm kind of split on whether I like the score or not, but they did a really good job of setting the mood specifically for the environment that Travis is in, because especially in the scene where he goes and he has the shootout with all the pimps in the building he's in, the music is really tonally significant because it's almost like a distorted version of regular jazz that seems to be playing, and it really, I don't know what it was about the way they set it up so that the score started playing at a certain point, like right after he like sat down on the couch. Something happened in the score. I honestly, if I had a movie clip, I would show it right now so I could explain it. The point I'm trying to make is that the score was really good, and I think it got Oscar nominated too. Let me see. Yeah, so it was nominated for Best Score, and that's actually, yeah, okay, yeah, I was right. That's actually pretty cool because I was wondering if it had, but yeah. Anyway, the score I can't talk a whole lot about because I'm not like a music genius. All I can say is that it was really good at setting a mood that definitely induced sort of a psychological thriller feel at times, and at other times just sort of this feeling of a guy driving a taxi. And that's sort of how the movie feels, is that sometimes you're like, oh, this is just like a normal guy driving a taxi, and then other times you're like, wow, this guy's fucking insane. And this place is really dark and kind of a scary place. New York is distorted through Travis's eyes at times, and Score does a good job at accompanying that. Again, the ending, pretty interpretive. I made 2 notes about that. I don't know why, but ending is pretty interpretive, which I'm not a huge fan personally of interpretive endings. I can enjoy it, and obviously, I've said obviously so many times in this podcast. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but obviously, I liked the movie. I don't know why I said obviously again. I don't know. But I did enjoy the movie. I just don't enjoy interpretive endings a whole lot. I like to know where everyone ended up, and at the end, you're kind of left wondering if Travis is gonna snap again, or what's going on in his head at this point, because really, it ends with him getting shot, and then he's a hero, and then he just kind of like, the last scene is kind of like just him getting in his taxi and driving, like I said, and I don't really know what to make of that, I guess. Like, is it just, like, I guess it's just not over for him, like he's gonna definitely snap again is probably what they're leading me to think. Who knows? But yeah, I Scorsese, I mean, this is one of his earlier movies, and I've seen Goodfellas, I've seen The Departed, I've seen The Wolf of Wall Street, I've seen Hugo, and I've seen a couple others. I can't remember. Those are the ones. I liked all of those a lot, so I was pretty excited to dive into some of his earlier work. And I enjoyed it. I'm not a huge fan of the interpretive endings. I just said that like 3 times. I don't know why I'm saying it again. Also, it's kind of a dark movie, and I could do dark movies. I mean, it's not too dark. Like there's obviously movies with much worse content out there, but if I'm giving my personal opinion on it, like I said I wasn't going to in the first podcast, I have to say that I enjoyed it, but I don't know if I'm going to watch it again anytime soon, just because I don't know. I have a lot of other movies I want to watch, and I would recommend this, though. I would recommend this to anybody who A, enjoys Martin Scorsese, and B, likes film. I mean, there's a lot to unpack when you're watching it. There's a lot of really well-crafted scenes from Scorsese, and De Niro gives, out of all of the movies I've seen him in, that's his best performance that I've seen. I know there's a lot I haven't seen yet. Oh, I haven't seen Raging Bull, which is like next up on my, not next up on my to-watch, but it's high up there, because I'm not a huge fan of boxing movies, but this is supposed to be different. I don't know how else to explain it. I've read some things about Raging Bull, and I know it's not your typical boxing movie. I mean, I always thought Rocky was kind of cheesy. You can hate me for that, but I just did. And I don't know if I have much more to say about Taxi Driver. It was a very interesting movie, very much left up to interpretation. Not just the ending, but like other aspects of the movie. I think that multiple people could have different viewpoints on exactly why stuff happened. Like when Travis tries to assassinate the presidential candidate. Like, why did he do that? I mean, you could come up with a few different reasons, and I don't think that one would be more right than another. I think if you can back it up with something from the movie, that I would totally agree with you. And so that's Taxi Driver. I don't know how much more I have to say about it. Let's see. Do I have any extra notes? I write down stuff when I'm watching movies, particularly now that I'm doing like this podcast. So I'm just gonna check and see if I have anything else that I haven't talked about yet. Oh, I did talk about. This is a little different, but I think it's related to. I think that there is a relation to modern politics in this movie. I said in I had a little paragraph I wrote, so I'm just going to read the paragraph I did. So this film is still relevant today when it comes to its discussion of politics. Palantine, the next presidential candidate, seems to be a good man based on the conversation that he and Travis have in the taxi, or at least he is respectable. There is no talk of his actual politics, and Travis admits that he doesn't actually know about any of the issues in the country, which is actually pretty funny now that I'm reading it out loud. Yet later in the movie, Travis attempts to assassinate Palantine, seemingly just because of association to Betsy, who has done Travis wrong. This is relevant in that many people are uninformed when it comes to politics nowadays, and there seems to be a groupthink mindset when it comes to opinions on politicians, which... Take it or leave it. I just wrote that down for my film class because I needed to fill in another paragraph, and one of the things I could talk about is relation to modern politics, and I don't even know if I really believe what I just wrote there, but figured I'd share it anyway in case anybody agrees with me. If you're listening to this and you're like, wow, yeah, he's totally right. So woke. Yeah, of course I am. I'm always woke. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I didn't just write that down for the points like I just said I did. Yeah, tomorrow, or I guess tonight, I'm watching Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee. I'm probably going to do the episode tomorrow. I am pretty excited for it because I enjoyed Black Klansman quite a bit. I was really entertained that whole movie. And this is supposed to be one of Spike Lee's best. And I've always kind of wanted to get into Spike Lee because I used to be really big into the NBA. And he, like, directed the My Career portion of NBA 2K16, I think. And I was like, yo, Spike Lee, I don't even know who you are, but you did the 2K My Career. And so I wanted to, like, watch his movies, but I never did. And now I'm going to. Now, I mean, I watched Black Klansman when it was in theaters, and now I get to dive into probably his most respected work, from what I know, Do the Right Thing. At least that's what my film professor said, and he's a pretty smart guy, so I believe him. Thanks for listening. You guys kind of get to join me on my journey of watching all these movies. I have a lot of classics that I'm going to be watching. I explained this in my first episode. I don't know if anybody listened to that, but if you're listening to this and you made it this far, yeah, I'm going to be getting into some classics. I'm going to be watching new releases in theaters like I did with Midsummer. And thanks for listening if you made it this far. I mean, it's really cool to be able to share this with people. I say all the time, don't I? I say and I've noticed that as I've been talking, I say and but and actually and obviously like all the time. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I do it. And sometimes I'll say a sentence when I'm like recording and I'm like, why did I say it that way? And then I make a comment about the way I was talking and then it's like even more awkward. You've probably noticed it multiple times in this episode if you made it this far. Yeah, it's pretty casual. If you can't tell, if you've made it this far, this is how probably most of my podcasts are going to go. Just so I can talk about movies. That's really the reason I'm doing this. And I said it again. I said and can you believe this shit? Stay tuned for tomorrow. I guess I'm going to be uploading Do the Right Thing probably tomorrow night. Yeah. Goodbye.